Welcome to Gay Guru Live with host Brian Madigan. On Gay Guru Live, Brian will be focusing on everything queer and spiritual. Whether you're looking to come to terms with the faith you were born into or to discover something new, Brian and his guests will light the way with insight and humor. So please welcome your host of Gay Guru Live, Brian Madigan.
Hi everyone, you're watching Gay Guru Live. I'm your host, Brian Madigan, and we're coming to you live on the Bold Brave TV network. Welcome, welcome, welcome to episode 15 of Gay Guru Live, the show that's focusing on everything queer and spiritual. So the leading edge of the movement towards our rights, the movement towards embracing queer people as a whole, are trans people, people who are expressing the non-binary. These are people who have been pushed to the edge and who are frankly suffering the most in terms of oppression that queer people in general are experiencing today. One of the things that we're trying to do with the show is open up the diversity of the paths that we've all found our ways forward to healing, to recovery, and to living our best lives. And spiritual connection is one of the powerful tools that all queer people can use once they separate this idea of religion from this idea of spirituality and can really embrace who they are at a deeper and deeper level, and then bring that expression out into the world. Our guest today is a transgender queer spiritual drag artist, a digital chaplain, a podcaster, a YouTuber, and a speaker who knows a lot about using those spiritual connections to lift themselves up, to heal, and to move themselves forward in lives. So please join me in welcoming our wonderful guest, Bonnie Violet, to the show. Bonnie, welcome. So good to have you here.
Hi there. How's it going? I'm so glad to be here.
It's really going well. I'm really happy to have you here as well. So let's start. I'd like to start the show with just a little bit of sort of talk about childhood. Those formative years are so important for us as queer people, often challenging for us as queer people, and I like to give people that context. So what tradition were you raised in?
I wasn't really, my family wasn't church-going folks, so they didn't really take me to church, but I did. I went to church really young at like 5 or 6 with an aunt, and I went pretty religiously throughout my whole my whole childhood. Basically, I loved church. It was I ended up landing in. I started in Free Methodist, landed in non-denominational, and for me, church was just a safe place to go. It wasn't home and it wasn't school where I struggled with being, and so church seemed to be like a more comfortable space for me to be in.
So what messages did you receive growing up about who you are, I guess both in church and perhaps in the other environments as well?
Yeah, I mean, in church, I think I felt like they never talked about people like me or like us. I never heard about LGBTQ folks. I never heard good or bad. They just were invisible. I don't recall ever any sort of like negative statements, but there definitely wasn't pastors and preachers and stories that were told about queer people or trans people or gay people. So to me, it was very non-existent. So I think I struggled with seeing myself in the scripture beyond more than just like a spiritual, like, you know what I mean? Like spiritual way, I guess. And at home, it was a different story. Like my dad was definitely, he was constantly censoring my femininity. I could never speak like loud enough, or wherever I had my hands, or I sat incorrectly. And so it was really difficult for me to know how to express myself around my father in particular.
Right, and how did that sort of quashing of your expression of who you are as a human being, how do you think that affected you in your journey, particularly as a young child?
It had a huge impact on me. I didn't know that my dad was like, say, attacking my femininity. Like at the time, I just felt like I was wrong. Like I just felt like I could not do right. And I became very self-conscious and very unable to just kind of be present without the concern of like fear of only verbal attack or whatever. But for me, that was like enough, in particular from my father. I experienced a traumatic experience when I was like 5 or 6. I don't recall it. And I don't remember much of my childhood up until about the age of 12 due to that experience. And so I didn't really, and like I said, I still don't recall what it was. I was told about it later, and it caused me to have this I would cry anytime there was a potential conflict. And so I would get all, upset. And then, of course, that would make my father upset because that's not what a boy does. And so it was this constant thing where I just kind of felt, it just felt like broken or something. Like I just wasn't, I couldn't, I just didn't know how to be the way I was supposed to be. And I felt like I was just constantly failing at that in some ways.
Yeah, so that and a lot of people like to sort of lessen the impact that sort of little t trauma has on us as queer kids. And I think, like, as you're stating, it really is a huge thing. It doesn't have to be violent verbal abuse or physical abuse in order for it to impact us that way and just make us feel like we're not okay. So is that really sort of how you felt you grew up, just with this sense that you're just not okay, that who you are isn't okay?
Yeah, yes, and also I was also really smart, and I happened to do really well in school, and was kind of just a likable person. So in some ways, I was like really great and powerful. My parents kind of looked up to me to the point where they couldn't really support me in ways that I needed because they didn't see me as needing them. Also, I don't think they just had the ability to support me in the ways that I needed because they weren't, they both dropped out of high school and junior high. And, so a lot of where I was going in the academic realm, they really didn't have a lot of like guidance for me. And so they always told me I was okay, I was great, I was awesome, and I could do anything. But then I also really struggled with not knowing how to do a lot of things and feeling like I had to know it all already. And because I didn't, I felt like there was something wrong with me again. It was just kind of, again, another message of me feeling like I'm supposed to be more than I am able to be. And that somehow that's some sort of like failing on my part.
Right, right, of course. So you talk about how your perception of your femininity eventually led you to think that you were a gay man. So let's talk a little bit about what that was like for you and whether or not you realized that that was somehow only part of the picture and you still felt like there was a piece missing.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a sexually active young person. Really did end up having an encounter with an older man when I was a teen, which to look at it now is what it was. But at the time, it just kind of felt like this thing that happened that I didn't feel like I had a lot of control over, but it felt also instinctual in some ways, like just natural in some ways, I guess. And initially, I just thought I was some sort of like demon possession or some sort of like something that kind of took over me or took me out of myself. That happened when I was 16. And then again at like 18 or 19 when I was in college, I remember my first experience going and meeting with a guy and then like afterwards like going home and burning anything and everything that had to do with that night, like all my clothes, the phone number, everything like that, because I felt like there was something, I don't know, it just seemed like there was something wrong with me. Again, I didn't necessarily know why, but that's just kind of where I was with it.
Right. As you look back at that now, do you think that was partly internalized homophobia or partly just that you weren't really awakened to who you really were, to your actual identity fully?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think I really knew that that was a possibility that I could be. I definitely didn't think that God wanted me to be like that either. And so I really struggled with that. And until I had kind of a vision or a moment with God in which I realized that God wasn't sad about me being gay, as I saw myself at that time, but God was sad that I was sad. And for whatever reason, I got that message of like, you are who you are. God knows why you are the way you are. And at that time in my life, I just thought again that I was wrong and I just couldn't do any better. And that maybe God would have some sort of compassion for me anyway, because I didn't know how to exist any differently than I am. So I think I really just didn't know because I never saw who I could be and all the things that I was told were possible for a person like me. Just it was just so limited, and I never quite fit. Even as a gay man living, I was married to a man, and like in gay community, I just never quite felt like I fit right, and I didn't really know why.
Right. Just because you just didn't have the opportunity to even understand what your identity could possibly be, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about discovering drag and sort of what that meant for you and how that impacted you.
Yeah. So I tried drag when I was like 20. I tried drag and I did it for a job that I was doing, and people responded really well to it, but I had a really hard time with that because I was just coming out as a gay man, and I was like, I wanted to be seen as a guy who likes guys, not a guy who wants to be a girl, which again was my own internalized transphobia because I don't think most people would care about that. But I was really concerned about people thinking that I was a guy that was wanting to be a girl or was a girl or that sort of thing. So I had to kind of put it away for a long time till about 4 years ago. I picked it up after 15 years of recovery and having God back in my life again, or spirituality back in my life. As a fundraiser, I got into drag for the recovery community, and through that process, I actually came to realize that I was trans as well.
So let's talk a little bit about that trans awakening. You know, it's such a long period of time where when we can touch into the transphobia thing, is with that internalized transphobia. I think it's an important thing for us to recognize too, that that game that was going on in your head. Let's talk a little bit about that awakening and what that was like for you. Was it a flash, or was it a slow boil, or how did it work?
It was gradual. Like, it was interesting because even as like a queer man, like even just being gay anymore didn't seem like enough. It was like I was like a bearded lady because I had a beard, and I was hyper feminine or whatever before I even transitioned. And I think the thing for me is when I started doing drag, I had the permission to put on clothes and express myself in ways that I couldn't allow myself as a boy. And through that process, it was extremely vulnerable for me. Like I was petrified. I felt super exposed. And so it was really difficult for me. And I realized everyone around me, they weren't as fearful of it as I was. And then at the end of the night, I never wanted to get out of it. You know, it was like, I just feel so good expressing myself in this way. I've never felt so good felt so aesthetically happy with myself that I was like, I don't ever want to get out of this. And so I think that's really what just kind of started to trigger it for me. And then COVID happened and just kind of smacked me in the face and was like, girl, you ain't getting any, you know what I mean? It's like, what are you going to do? Wait till you're 60 to then decide to explore this thing even further.
Right, and so it's an interesting touch point. You know, I think for a lot of people who were going through powerful transformations and transitions just around the time that COVID hit, it's almost like you were given this safe cocoon to go and explore yourself. Is that sort of how COVID rolled out for you?
Yeah, and I got stuck with myself enough to where I wasn't, I wasn't lost in the trappings of life. I left working. I just let go of a lot of things. And so I was kind of stuck with myself, more spiritually even. I kind of become, I think, really dependent on the recovery community as a sober person. And so I think I would get lost into that a lot. And I don't think that I really, there was time for me just to develop myself a little bit more. And there was just kind of this idea of like, if you were to die tomorrow, or if your family members were to die tomorrow, like, would I be happy with where I'm at? And I just was like, no, I need to do this thing. And then when I was afraid I wasn't trans enough, or I was afraid that I wouldn't be loved anymore, that my family would have a problem with it, or, all these sorts of things. And it just eventually just got to a point where I was like, I don't need to do it for them. I need to do it for me.
For sure. So how did that all roll out? I mean, did you find acceptance within your recovery community, within your family?
Yeah, so I first came out by going by Bonnie Violet to the recovery community. I've been sober for 15 years, so they knew me as not Bonnie Violet. And so one of the things that was nice because of COVID, I was able to put in the Zoom chat, hi, I go by Bonnie Violet now. If you could call me Bonnie Violet and use she pronouns, that would be great. And then the recovery community was really fantastic. And so that was really helpful. My family, on the other hand, that's been a completely different story, but the recovery community really kind of supported me. And then once I went in to get on hormones, it was a very affirming process. I remember, I mentioned being afraid that I wasn't trans enough, but, it's kind of a gatekeeping process where you have to go to the doctor and it feels like you have to be trans enough in order for them to say, okay, we're going to go ahead and give you medication. And when I went to go into that appointment, I couldn't shut up about all of the experiences I had around my transness from, a kid all the way up until, you know what I mean? So it was really
Yeah.
obvious that I had been trans my whole life, and I just hadn't, and I had been kind of working to where I was, but I just hadn't made it there yet.
Beautiful. Well, it's time for us to take a quick break. You're watching Gay Guru Live. We're coming to you live on the Bold Brave TV network with our wonderful guest, Bonnie Violet. And when we're back, we're going to talk to Bonnie about her connection to spirituality, its support for her sobriety, and how it's continued to support and manifest for her in her life. So hang tight. We'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. We discover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back, everybody. You're watching Gay Guru Live. I'm your host, Brian Madigan, and we're coming to you live on the Bold Brave TV network with our special guest, Bonnie Violet. So, Bonnie, it sounds like you were pretty much connected spiritually at a very young age. Did that connection kind of continue throughout all of your journey, or did it sort of wane at certain points and then come back?
Yeah, so I would say that the spirituality was always there, but I wasn't always aware of it. So, I can look back now and see that I was always spiritually connected, but the way that I connected and the things that I were able to call spiritual changed. When I was 19, I was infected with HIV. I got the diagnosis when I was 20, and to me, that told me that I was definitely not eligible for church anymore. And I felt like I didn't know how to have God in my life. And so I started drugs and alcohol, and they really saved my life. I mean, they softened the blow of life that was really difficult for me to stomach and deal with the HIV diagnosis and needing to go on treatment and the dealings with the family and everything that kind of came along with that, and the loss of God and church that had been such an important thing to me. Drugs and alcohol really just picked me up, and the community. I had some of the best times in my life, and really was able to find some freedom and really come to be okay with who I was as an HIV positive person. Eventually I was able to start a nonprofit in my early 20s and doing HIV and AIDS work in Idaho. And then within about 3 years after doing that, I ended up getting sober. And getting sober at the age of 29 is really what kind of brought the idea of me being able to have spirituality in my life again. As a queer person, I never knew those things could exist in a very intentional way. And so getting into sobriety and seeing queer people talk about this relationship with God or higher power and being queer, and they seem to work well, I was very intrigued by that and really kind of leaned into seeking again this idea of having a very conscious spiritual way of living.
Beautiful. So I really appreciate that, almost a sense of gratitude coming for you for the role that drugs and alcohol played just in helping you get through what is a difficult journey for all of us. And I think that's it's a very the non sober behaviors, I think, are a big part of life for many queer people. I don't think there's very many people I've heard who can actually say, I'm really grateful for that having happened, and of course grateful for being back out here. Can you speak a little bit more to that? Because I think it's a very unique perspective.
Yeah, of course, I wish that I would never have needed to have something to soften the blow of life. I think, it'd be great to not, to that being queer, being trans, even living with HIV didn't have to be such a traumatic experience. But because it was, I was grateful to have something to kind of help me get through it. Um, yeah, and even more grateful that I was able to get away when I needed to, because because and part of the, so I can be really grateful that I had it and I got to the other end. But it did come with a lot more traumas and a lot more kind of baggage and things on top of what was already there that I've had to kind of sift through and work through. But I'm grateful, I'm grateful that I was able to do that, because I don't know how much I would have lived without it. Like I don't know that I would have lived to this point, to where I could get over it, find God again, live into my transness, all that sort of stuff. So I hope that one day people like myself don't have to go through the experiences that I have to go through, and don't need drugs and alcohol to, get them through. But, I'm really grateful that of the journey that I've been able to go on to get to who I and where I am now with
Yeah.
myself.
I think we're all praying for the day that no queer person, certainly no queer young person, has to deal with any of that stuff. But it's reality. So let's talk a little bit about the journey back to spirit. I know for so many people, I know the journey to sobriety required them in many ways to sort of re-embrace themselves as spiritual beings, whether they're calling it God or a higher power or whatever. And I think that's a really important message for a lot of people in our community who resist these ideas because they associate them with religion. So can we speak a little bit to just that journey for you?
Yeah, and that made it really difficult for me, because I did have a lot of spiritual trauma. So words like God, prayers that I grew up with, like church, Christianity was something I was really had a really difficult time kind of being near or around. One of the gifts that was really awesome was that I actually learned that I could, like, spirituality didn't have to be what I was taught and raised about. That God, that I hadn't realized how I started to see God and started to see the world. Like, I never really thought like God was out to get me, or that the world was out to get me, but I was living my life as if that was so true. And so it was really helpful to kind of be with a group of other people who have kind of explored this idea. Well, what is God? What would God do for me? Like, I think for me, I became reliant on God in a way that I'd never been before. I think in some ways, and again, it's that awful space of kind of being in pain and desperate and whatever, that kind of created this opening for me to be open to the idea that there's just something more, that God could even be presented to me in a different way, in a way that could be, that I could use, I guess, in order to kind of be okay. Because I think that there was such a rigidity and such a small understanding of what God could be and what it meant to be spiritual or religious. And I just never fit into that. And so it was exciting to kind of think of that, because, and to see that God actually had been there all along. And for me, that's still my experience today, is that I I don't know what the heck God is. I don't know what to call it. I barely have the words to speak about what my experience is with it. But I have had an experience with God, with an encounter with the divine, with spirit, with that which is within me and between you and I and inside you. And, like, all these sorts of things that I know is there and I've connected with. And the more often I can kind of remember that and act as if I know that to be true. I just have a better, I just tend to be a little bit more kinder and have a little bit more grace, and tend to get the results in life that I was actually like wanting to get, that I was just struggling with figuring out how to, get the results I wanted outside of that.
Yeah, and that perspective is so important, because not only does it bring us to acceptance of ourselves, which I think is where it has to start, but it also helps us to accept others as well, right? It helps us to broaden our perspective and become much more accepting and much more supportive of other people and their individual journeys, even if we don't necessarily understand them. So I think that's a really powerful point. So what does spiritual practice or spiritual connection or going to church or whatever look like for you today?
Yeah, well, and one thing I wanted to say, I think one of the things that I've done and continue to do on a daily basis is like I started calling my name Bonnie Violet, and I started asking you to do the same. And to me, that is a very spiritual practice, because I do believe that my transness and me living into my trans identity is a spiritual awakening. It's me having the ability and the freedom and um, like it's me putting my spirit on the outside. It's me putting all the things that I used to have to hide and keep within me, and kind of, expressing it on the outside, and seeing the world affirm it around me, and seeing people light up. And, so to me, in a lot of ways, one of my big spiritual practices is one, living into my transness, but doing drag is also a ritual and a practice, because it can even let me like turn that volume up even more. Like it could play a little further and go a little bit deeper. And even I think play with the kind of childhood that I wasn't afforded when I was younger. And so I think sometimes doing drag can add kind of a playfulness, or an ability for me to just allow myself to do things that 40-year-olds, most 40-year-olds probably don't find themselves okay with doing, but it's been so healing and so powerful for me personally, but also seeing how it impacts the people that I'm around when I'm in drag. It's from like kids who just see all the glitter and they're just like, oh my gosh, to like the queer kid that's like, oh my gosh, that could be me. Or I didn't know that I could be queer and also have some sort of spiritual way of living, that those two things don't have to live separately.
Right, and that's it's one of the whole points for me doing this show, is to show people that these things are not separate. They can be together. We just have to shed some of the stuff we've been taught in order to do that. So you talk about yourself as being a queer chaplain. Can you tell us what exactly is a queer chaplain?
Yeah, so for me, I feel like a queer chaplain, or a chaplain of another sort. I feel my nephew passed away in my arms a few years back, and that experience reminded me of like wanting to do spiritual work and being present with people around really difficult things. And death and dying to the body was a little bit too traumatic for me. Like I didn't feel ready to be working with people around physical death and dying, but I really felt like being present with people around death and dying to self, really in the form of identity, made a lot of sense to me, because I had had so many experiences of being crushed and dying from one identity to the next, and not being able to access God, or see God, or have some sort of spiritual um, practice through that experience, like a very conscious and intentional one. And so I really felt like I wanted to try to help people invite some sort of spiritual understanding into their new identity, and often an identity that is thought to, or people were told that they no longer had access to God. So like LGBTQ folks, drug addicts, I'm also a survivor of sexual assault, all those sorts of things that we've been told take us away from God, um, which is a lie and it's a delusion. But it's a lie that I believed often. And so just trying to help people come to see that. And spirituality isn't often, it's not, it can happen in a church, and it can happen with hymns and prayer, or it can happen on the dance floor on ecstasy, listening to hot house music, or it can be at home by yourself, like, I don't know, cuddling up with a teddy bear, or, like there's lots of ways that I think that we can connect, and that we do connect with my higher selves, and and something outside of ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's a beautiful point. This coming back to ourselves, I think happens for all of us. Even when the transitions and the transformations and the understanding of the shift in identity are small, that ability to guide people through saying, I'm no longer who I was, even if it's in a small way, can be a really powerful process and very important for people to feel embraced when they're realizing I'm more than I thought I was. I'm different than I thought I was.
Right. And I think a big thing is just helping people come to awareness of what it is. What is it that's keeping you alive? What is it that is animating you? What is it that's giving you purpose? What is it that is causing you to, have to do things in life, good, bad, or the otherwise? Or, if you're wanting to have results like you had once before, what were you doing then? So a lot of it, I think, is even just coming to an awareness of what are my higher powers? What are the things that animate my body and cause me to live? What is it that gives me life? And is the life that I'm getting, what am I doing with that? And
Right.
how can I do more with it? And I mean, I think ultimately that's just what spirituality and religion, I think, all that stuff is all about. So, and I think we just naturally do it.
Wonderful. So it's time for us to take another quick break. You're watching Gay Guru Live. I'm your host, Brian Madigan. We're coming to you live on the Bold Brave TV network. When we're back, we're going to be talking with Bonnie a little bit more about discovering the spirituality through drag and how life has just led her to the work that she does today. So hang tight, and we'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back, everybody. You're watching Gay Guru Live. I'm your host, Brian Madigan, and we're coming to you live on the Bold Brave TV network with our wonderful guest, Bonnie Violet. So, Bonnie, just reading about you and all the various things that you're up to, it seems that you just allow life to sort of present you ideas about the work you're going to be doing, the work you're going to be doing with people, the things you're going to offer. How has that process looked for you? It sounds a lot to me like God's just been guiding you forward.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening. Yeah, when I was a lot younger, it was very clear to me, this is what I wanted to do, and this is what I had to do in order to get it. And so many times through life, things just didn't work that way. And so as I've gotten older, I've just been really trying to be intentional and mindful and open to what the universe might bring my way. And so, yeah, like moving back to Idaho after not living here for many years, and doing interviewing drag artists about their spirituality, or trans people on YouTube or podcasts. Like, that's not stuff that I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. Like, but it also makes a lot of sense. And life has been challenging at times, and this sort of stuff, though, like it activates me, and it gives me life in ways that make it a lot more difficult. When I was working in cancer research or working in nonprofit, it was like I started to lose all that, and so I continue to just try to be in a space of trying to just trying to connect with whatever is kind of feeding me. And I think a lot of for me is the desire to I don't know a lot. I don't understand a lot, and I don't have a really clear idea of what God is and isn't, and all these sorts of things. And so I love talking with other people about how they see things and how they are experiencing things, because it just helps my God or my understanding be bigger. Because eventually, like, God isn't big enough for me. And that's not really true. It's just my understanding of what I know to be of life. And, just things happen. And then you're like, wait, that's not how it's supposed to happen. Or that's not supposed to be ... Oh, and yes, I'm so excited that so much is happening beyond my imagination, because it feels satisfying and interesting, and it kind of draws me to want to continue to do things. So the last little while, I've just kind of just most days I don't know what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and I just kind of show up to whatever is trying to feel right or correct, or I don't correct isn't even a word I use anymore, but just feels like, I don't know. I just try to trust my intuition. I think really the big deal is getting more able to be an ability to trust my intuition and understand that that might be how God speaks with me, versus the other ways I've felt told how and what to be doing in the world.
Yeah, it's almost like it's almost Buddhist the way you're sort of approaching this always from beginner's mind. I don't know, I want to know, I'll be open to the universe showing me what to know, which I think is beautiful. So let's cycle back a little bit. The connection between drag and spirituality, and drag as a spiritual practice. Was that something that, again, was it a flash of insight, or something that you just began to realize that something about your transness and drag was informing you about this power that drag has within it?
Yeah, I just kind of stumbled upon it. I think for a long time I was on the outside looking in. I was always drawn to drag artists, and I always felt like some sort of, like, I saw them as spiritual leaders, and things like that. And I never thought like I would do that. I think I was just like, oh well, one day maybe, or like I don't know what I was waiting for. Like, but a friend of mine had passed away and was a beautiful drag queen, and it just kind of triggered me to do it. And so when I first started interviewing drag artists about their spirituality, I wasn't doing drag. It was something that's come later, and I think since I've been able to do drag and also to have the conversations, I think it just leads to even more, I guess, more of a, like, it's just, I don't know how to explain it, but it just feels like it gets richer and richer and deeper, and it just kind of has been, one thing's led to the next. It's like I'm in Idaho now, and there's a lot of laws that are trying to combat drag being legal and visible and all those sorts of things. And I just found it really interesting that I've been feeling pulled to Idaho for months. And now that I get here, there's all these laws where they're trying to change things. And so I'm doing a series right now where I'm interviewing Idaho drag artists about their spiritual experiences, which to me just felt like, again, like one of those things where things were lining up to this moment. Even though I didn't want to be here, like I didn't want to move to Idaho, I was scared to be here, but it did feel like it's where I was supposed to be and where everything has kind of led me to be. So.
Right, very powerful. So drag artists, the drag community, have been so pivotal in the queer community at large for so many reasons, raising political awareness, raising funds for, to help people surviving with HIV. So many places that sort of part of our community has given so much. And what, for me, I've seen is this sort of ultra commercialization of drag with things like Drag Race. I'm not knocking RuPaul, but do you see those kinds of things, that sort of commoditization of drag, sort of undermining the essential power that drag has in our community?
I think that it has the potential for it, but I also think it's helpful too, because I think there's so much messaging and so many stories and so many things that can be told. Just like any one narrative, cannot speak on any group of people. And I think as a queer person, I feel called to always be seen as queer and to be queer, so to kind of be outside of the status quo. So as soon as being gay, or drag, like there is certain drag that's more mainstream, but there's also other drag that isn't. And so I think if anything, it just causes us to dig deeper and to expand ourselves even further. So I mean, I think in the long run, there's a lot of benefits, and yes, it's got a lot of bads to it too. But I think just as much as it does, because it's in part of like because it's in the mainstream and it's capitalism and it's like exploitation and all these sorts of things. So yes, it's gross that it's kind of in that, but also within that there is some good that comes from it. I think as long as we don't let that be our only story, our only narrative of like to tell our stories, and also that people think that that's the only way that we are.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of why I did the Drag and Spirituality Summit, was so that people could see there are so many more ways that drag can exist, and people who do drag, how they can exist and be in the world as well.
Right. So since we're on the topic, tell us about the Drag and Spirituality Summit. And it was held last autumn. How did it go? Was it, just tell us about how you feel about it, because it was a big deal.
Yeah. It was a really difficult, like all the timing and everything was like, this is the worst time to do it. But it also felt like it was the time to do it. Because drag is so potent in the mainstream culture as well as political now everywhere. And a year ago it wasn't quite there, but I don't know, it just seemed like the timing was right to go. And I've interviewed about 48 drag artists now about their spirituality. And that time I was at like 30. And I had met all these people from all over, and they felt very isolated, alone. Like they were kind of mavericks, like they were like doing something that's never been done before. And it was like, no, actually, there's a lot of us. And so I wanted to create a space where we could all get together and as drag artists and express and talk about our spirituality on panels and keynotes and through performance, but also to invite spiritual providers and caregivers to have an opportunity to learn from us how best they could serve us as a community within their church or their gathering site or their tradition or whatever. And so there was kind of this mutuality kind of space for that to happen, as well as also they could provide care to drag artists who are maybe, they're like, yeah, I do drag and yeah, I'm spiritual, but I don't know how to do it. And then once they get into it, it might bring up some things for them. And so having some spiritual care practitioners around them through that process, I think can be really helpful, especially if they happen to be in a similar like faith or tradition or background. And that's what I really like about chaplaincy. It's not about my spirituality or my tradition. It's about yours. And so a lot of what I end up doing is just helping connect people to the people that they might best fit with.
Right, and I think that's true of any, really truly effective healer or coach or even therapist. It's like, it's about the person you're working with and helping them on their journey of discovery, not telling them what that journey should be, right?
Yeah. And we had 60 people in person in Chicago this last October for the first one. And we had another about 30 people online. We did do it virtual. And so we're looking to do our second one this year. In October, we'll be in San Francisco, and then next year it'll be in Toronto. And so our goal is to continue to work to have more diversity and representation in, multi-faith, faith experience as well as drag experience and location. So I'm just really excited, as well as also accessibility. We did our best to have like ASL, and the virtual aspect is also a way of trying to create accessibility. And so I'm excited to continue to work on how to do better by more people in order to create a space for us all to bring our full selves into and have a hopefully as much as an equitable experience as possible.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think it's a fantastic idea And all, you know, the best of luck to you with all of that, because I think it's very important, you know, and that touches into the importance for spirituality for queer people in general on their journey. You know, is there anything you'd like to say about that, just in terms of finding that path and knowing that, you know, there is value in discovering yourself as a spiritual being?
Yeah, I mean, I think the truth of it is that we are spiritual in nature, and so and our spirit is ever present, and I think our connectedness with others is also always present. And I think the more that we can do to try to facilitate and cultivate and connect with that awareness and that understanding, and any of us can do that. And the reality of it is that we are doing it all the time. If we're alive, something's happening, right? And I think it's helpful when we can become aware of it in a way that also isn't religious or laborious, or I think that, you know what I mean, like in a way that takes you away from. Um, I think that the gift in knowing, or remembering that connection, that spirit. So um, I don't know. I think the big thing is just for people to realize that. And I think queer people and we, I think in a lot of ways we have to be spiritual. Like I'm grateful. Um, I couldn't imagine being spiritual if I was like a cishet dude. Like, why would I be? You know?
Me
And
either.
that's right. And I know I'm just kind of being a little flippant, but with what it's taken me to get to where I am, I couldn't imagine just, not living the life that I did to get to where, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
and that always intrigues me when I see people who I think don't need God in the way that I do, have God in the way that I do. Like, that's super intriguing to me.
Right. I think that, you know, it's there's something about the essential nature of queerness that is also extremely spiritual, despite what we've been told. And I think
Mhm.
that played out in ancient societies much more than it does in ours. But, you know, it's really an important message that if you are embracing your queerness, you will discover spirituality in there one way or another if you truly embrace it. Do you agree?
Right. Yeah. And I just think there's this power when we can claim it and call it what it is. Don't let the colonizers, don't let the oppressors, don't let them take away our connection to ourselves and to God or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I think
Yeah.
don't let yourself be robbed, because somebody co-opted something that was beautiful and sacred and wonderful. It's a
Beautiful.
hard process, but
It is a hard process, but worth it. So it's time for us to take another quick break. You're watching Gay Guru Live. I'm your host, Brian Madigan. We're coming to you live on the Bold Brave TV network with our special guest, Bonnie Violet. We'll be back in just a minute to talk about the work Bonnie's doing today and how you can get in touch with her, and we'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. We discover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back, everybody. You're watching Gay Guru Live. I'm your host, Brian Madigan. We're coming to you live on the Bold Brave TV network with our special guest, Bonnie Violet. So, Bonnie, what kind of work are you doing these days with individuals?
Yeah, so a lot of what I've been doing is just being in a lot of conversation. Right now, I have a YouTube channel, a queer chaplain, and a queer chaplain is just kind of the umbrella of my work. And so through that, I'm interviewing drag artists and trans people about their spirituality. I tend to do 12, 13-week series at a time, or 12 series at a time. And right now I'm interviewing Idaho drag artists about their spirituality. I also have a podcast with my aunt who grew up in the same little town that I did. She's a conservative Christian and I am not. And we are in really great relationships. She's actually my biggest supporter. She is the only person in my family who calls me by my name and my pronouns, and is aware of what's going on in my life. My father won't even talk to me, or you know what I mean? There's plenty of people in my family who don't even believe in God, who cannot be in relationship with me. And so we've made an effort to really try to be in relationship with one another and share what that experience is in the hopes of helping other people see what they can do in order to make that work for them. And so, and I too, I still have a really hard time liking everybody, especially people I feel like that are so hard out and hard pressed to get people like myself. And so I'm like, if I can't come to understand, and I've learned that understanding is not the goal, compassion is. And if I so I feel like if I can't do it with her, then I can't do it with nobody. And so it's been really interesting process, because we went 20-some years without being in relationship with one another before 4 years ago when we started getting together again. That podcast is called Splintered Grace. And yeah, we're working on the Dragon Spirituality Summit to take place this October, and who knows what's next, to be honest with you. I just moved to Idaho after being nomadic for 18 plus months. And so I really am unsure. I'm about ready to do kind of a inventory process, if you will, to really figure out what's working and what's not working. Because I feel like the last 18 months, I've just said yes to everything to kind of see what clicks. And I think I need to trim the fat a little bit and make some choices so that the quality and the connection can just get deeper.
Wonderful. So where's the best place for people to find out about you and you're up to so much and all the stuff that you're up to these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think going to queerchaplain.org, my website, I keep things pretty up to date there, so you can access all the different projects that I'm working on, my past work, present work. I'm hoping to get to do a lot more speaking engagements and preaching. Sometimes I'll preach in drag or speak in drag. Preaching still feels a little weird to me, but share my experience, testify, if you will, in and out of drag. And so I'm hoping to do a lot more kind of speaking and being in conversation with groups of people around some of this stuff in the next year. But queerchaplain.org, or you can search a queer chaplain on any of the things that you check things out on, whether you're a TikToker or a YouTuber or Instagram person. You can find, some stuff, I'm sure.
Wonderful. So do you have any closing messages or remarks for our audience as we start to finish up?
I think, we don't have to live life alone. The truth is that we're not. I often forget that. I often just live my life as if I'm the only one in the world who gets me and understands me. And to some degree, that's true. So I think just I don't know. What am I trying to say? I think ultimately, as I've gotten older, the only thing I have to do in life is me. is like the only thing I have to do is to do me and to do me to the best of my ability. And that's in a selfish way, but not a self-centered way. I think just really figuring out what it is that continuing to become more of like yourself, and kind of letting your intuition, your spirituality lead the way,
Beautiful.
and working to trust yourself. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, that brings our show to a close, everybody. You've been watching Gay Guru Live, coming to you live on the Bold Brave TV network. If you enjoyed this episode, please do us a favor and click like on whatever you're watching or listening to this on. And if you know somebody who could benefit from the conversation, this deep and beautiful conversation we've had today, please do me a favor and share the link with them. It would mean the world to us to broaden their perspectives and to truly bring options about the diversity of paths that are available to queer people out to the world. Once again, you've been watching Gay Guru Live, coming to you live on the Bold Brave TV network. I'm your host, Brian Madigan, and we'll see you all next week.
You've been watching Gay Guru Live with your host, Brian Madigan. As queer people, many of us have been rejected, even traumatized, but there are new ways forward that will allow you to discover the path that's right for you. Right here, Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.